What flute to buy? It's a frequently asked question that we get. We get phone calls and people ask, what should I be buying? And it's actually, it can be complex, but we narrowed it down. It's actually relatively simple. So if you're buying a flute for yourself, as a gift for someone that you know has never played an instrument before, so they've never played, they're first-time players. So we have recommendations for that, and they're on our website, quite frankly, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit. So we always say that the key of A or the key of B, a mid-range B or mid-range A, are ideal for beginners. They are, and it's not because they're a beginner flute. They happen to be in that key, but they happen to be easier to play because other flutes get longer, even mid-range. And some flutes are really small and they're kind of high-pitched, so they're not quite as pleasing in terms of the voice, and it takes actually technique to play a high-pitched flute. You need more air pressure. Where a mid-range, in the key of A or in the key of B, or even in the key of C, tends to be much easier to play. They're not beginner flutes. They're just easier to play. That's the only difference. So this is the key of A. So what happens is, because it's shorter, the fingering holes are a little bit closer together. The air, as you blow into it, doesn't need as much breath control because it's shorter, because as the flute gets longer, the energy of the air dissipates. So it takes a little bit more control, not a lot, but just a little bit. But if you've never played anything before, you want to have as much advantage as possible. So that would be the ideal for someone that's never played an instrument before. If you've played other instruments before, whether it's keyboard or drum, not necessarily wind instrument, but other instruments, you pretty much can buy, you can pretty much, any of the flutes will work. If you played a woodwind instrument, definitely any of the flutes will work. So any of the keys. So the difference really is whether you've played an instrument before or you've not. If you've played an instrument before, there's a certain comfort level knowing that instruments, how do I explain that? The best way to say that is that when you're learning something in a particular genre, whether it's a language or an instrument or a software, there's a threshold that you have to get past. And once you've learned that program or you've learned that instrument or that language, the second and the third or the fourth version of that language, or a different language, a different instrument, and no matter what, in a different software, the basics of it are the same, meaning that you tend to have more confidence, you tend to have a little bit more ease around it. You know you're not going to break it, and you're not doing anything wrong, you're just learning. So it's really, the threshold is, if you've never played an instrument before, you want the simplest flute to play, which on the website we explain is the key of mid-range A, mid-range B, mid-range C. Especially if you give it for a gift and they've never played before or potentially not played before. Those are really good gifts to give. But if you know that person has played other instruments before, it's pretty much free range. Any of it would work. There is one minor exception, and I'm going to go ahead and bring that out, and that would be a bass flute. And the reason for that is the bass flutes are really good size. They're really deep. This one happens to be in the key of B minor. Everyone loves the low tones. Bar down, it's amazing. They're just, at some level you kind of go, wow, I want to be able to do that. The limitation is not just the spacing of the fingering holes, but it's also the hole sizes, the fingering hole sizes. You have to have at least mid-sized hands and fingers, and you have to play really flat fingered, because if you play this way, it leaks out of the back, the air, because the key is to make sure the hole is completely sealed. So you have to play really flat fingered, and you do have to have good size holes, and it makes sense that you have to have played a flute before. You have to know how to, at least have a good sense of how a flute works and how it operates and how you get a good tone out of it. If you have good sized hands, you could definitely play a bass flute. If your hands are small and your fingers tend to be thin or small, it's probably not the flute that you're going to be very happy with. So that would be the only other variable in that. But other than that, basically, for a flute that's a person has never played before, go with what we're talking about on the website, the mid-range A, B, or C. Someone that's played instruments before, especially if they've played wood instruments, pretty much anything, and just keeping in mind that that person who has good, they don't have the huge hands. I don't know how they have big hands. I have average male hands, and I know quite a few of the women that have really nice long fingers, and so that would work. But the key to it is play flat fingered. So I hope that helps.